make me the co-host, Mataji, please? Hare Krishna.
Hare Krishna Prabhuji, Danvat Pranam.
Hare Krishna.
Okay, let's get started here. Okay, why is it not letting me do that? Can you guys see the presentation?
No,
No,
Prabhuji.
Prabhuji, not yet.
You can see now?
Yes, Prabhuji, now we can see.
Yes, Prabhuji.
So let's get started from our class. So I'm just gonna go over the previous slideshows that we had. So we started talking about Vedas and what Vedas, they're the privilege of humanity, right? So these are the topics we discussed till who recorded the Vedas. Today we'll take on what Vedas actually are and how they are beneficial to us. We talked about it before, but we'll go in a bit more depth today. And then we'll talk about how what Vedas have already discovered within themselves, within the Vedas, what they've discovered versus what modern science has. Right? Modern science is able to get to certain points from the Vedas, but there's a lot of things that they still have not even discovered. And how do we learn the Vedas? What is the process of learning? What is the process to get the knowledge from the Vedas? So, moving on. What happened here? Stop for a second. Yeah. So let's go to this slideshow. Um, so what Vedas? Vedas is basically knowledge. You know, Bhagavatam is one of them. It's a vast body of knowledge comprising of 100 billion Sanskrit verses, maybe more actually. It's compared to a desire tree. It's mundane and spiritual. It has both mundane topics and spiritual topics. And these are some of the topics that it talks about: social, political, religious, economic, military, and so on. So there are five Vedas. There are four main. So there are five types of Vedas. So first, the four main. And from last class, as we discussed, actually the main Ved was Atharva Ved, which got divided into the four Vedas: Rig, Yajur, Sam, and Atharva. The fifth Ved is actually Itihasas, Puranas, Upanishads. There are 108 Upanishads and there are 18 Puranas. And this all information is in Bhagavatam, but before Bhagavatam, it was in the Chandogya Upanishad where it is described. And later on, Bhagavatam also has the information. Because if you remember, Bhagavatam is the essence of the Vedanta Sutra. It is the natural commentary on the Vedanta Sutra. So it is the essence of all the Vedas. So whatever the Vedas have, Bhagavatam also has. So Vedas deal with three very important things. Right? First is Karma Kand. What is Karma Kand? Karma Kand is basically a way to get, it is one path. It is one path that we can follow. Right? So one second. So Karma Kanda is used, it's this way to elevate to the heavenly planets, right? Karma Kanda does not take you to the spiritual realm. It only takes you up to the heavenly planets. Heavenly planets meaning being like in with the demigods, enjoying. It goes in a lot of depth. I won't go in too much depth, but basically before even you get to the heavenly planets, the earth, above earth, there are different realms that you can go into. And I'm not going to go into too much depth. They're all in the Bhagavatam. It's in Canto 5, which is all based on cosmology. But except that, just the basic point of view, there are different realms within the universe that you can go into even before going to heavenly planets. So Karma Kanda will lead you there. Then there's Jnana Kanda, which is decreasing material involvement and understanding the supreme truth through speculative knowledge. So Jnana Kanda is above Karma Kanda, but it's not the best. Then the last is Upasana Kanda, which is decreasing material involvement through worship of the Supreme. Now, of course, worshipping the Supreme is the most important thing, and that's why it is the highest. Therefore, Upasana or worship of the Supreme Personality of Godhead is considered the topmost, where we follow Bhakti. Then the four material aspects of Vedas, they are prescribed to these four aspects are called Purusharthas. The reason why they're there is to uplift one to the platform to worship the God, worship Krishna. Because not everyone wants to follow the bhakti, path of bhakti, right? So what about those materialistic people who are so engrossed in getting material gains, right? They're also fallen souls, and they also should be able to be uplifted. That is why they are described in the Vedas for us. So the first is dharma. Now, what is dharma? Dharma is basically religiosity for gaining good karma to become eligible for artha. So we use that to become eligible for artha. We follow dharma to become eligible for artha. Artha is the economic development. When we do good, we'll get one benefit. When we do good things, we'll get piety. When we do good things, we'll get good karma. Through the good karma, we are able to lead a better life. That is artha. Artha, like for example, our dharma right now, for all of us who are in this age group, our dharma is to study. Now, of course, there is a spiritual aspect and the material aspect. The spiritual aspect is what we are doing in a way, and also it is to do the study of Bhagavatam, Bhagavad Gita, other books that are prescribed by the acharyas. The material aspect is to get material knowledge, get a good career, right? Work hard for your career. That is our dharma, right? We are all, again, if you do in the Varnashrama side, we are in the brahmachari stage. Brahmachari is for everyone. It is not just for men or women. Brahmachari basically means studying. That stage means studying. It does not go for a specific gender. It is just for studying. So our dharma right now is to study. Now, what will dharma get us? Dharma will get us artha. Artha is get a good career, make money in that side. Now, when we start making money, when we start getting these opportunities, and we start getting all this wealth, we get kama, sense gratification. Now I have a lot of money, let me go buy the new iPhone, let me go buy this new laptop, let me go buy this, let me go buy that. So that is what it gets us. Playing, okay, so Khushi is asking, what about playing sports for our dharma? Playing sports, what is playing sports? Why does one play sport? Okay, yes, in a way you can say getting knowledge, that is for sure, right? You want to get a career into, you want to become, let's say you want to become a basketball player. So even to become the basketball player, you have to get that knowledge of how to play basketball. You have to learn the techniques, you have to learn the plays, you have to learn what kind of tackle you can do, what kind of how to throw the ball into the basketball. So that is all gaining knowledge. That is all dharma. Dharma is just gaining knowledge, any type of knowledge. For us, the dharma is getting knowledge, acquiring the knowledge that is available in the material world. So anything that we do that is for gaining knowledge falls under our dharma. Moving on from kama, so from kama we get to moksha. So sense gratification, having enjoyed enough sense gratification, then through which we go to a purifying process, and we get moksha. Now, moksha again is liberation, right? Liberation meaning might be a better life in our next birth that we take. In the next life, we might get a better parents, we might get better siblings, we might get better life, like a better, what's that called? We might get a good way of living, basically. Instead of being in a poor family, you're in a rich family. So liberation does not mean going back to Godhead. Liberation might also take us to one of those other realms I was talking about before. Now, the Vedic tree of knowledge, right? This whole tree that we have, right? The whole Vedas is basically in a way a tree. So the first thing we have the branches. That is the starting. We have Karma Kand, Jnana Kand, and Upasana Kand. Now branches, we don't like branches, right? Nobody likes branches. Oh, this branch looks so good. I mean, it may look good, but why does it look? Because of the flowers. So the flowers are Dharma, Artha, Kama. Then you have the, right, on the branch, let's say you have a mango tree. So the mango tree starts giving the mangoes. Those, in Hindi, they call it kachi keri. Basically, these are unripened mangoes. They're not yellow, they're greenish, they're very sour. Those are Upanishads and Vedanta Sutra. Now, once they mature and they grow and they become very sweet, that's the ripened fruit. That is what we like to eat. And that is Srimad Bhagavatam. So Srimad Bhagavatam is the natural commentary on the Upanishads and the Vedanta Sutra. In Bhagavatam, there's this verse which basically says that, "O expert and thoughtful men, relish Srimad Bhagavatam, the mature fruit of the desire tree of Vedic literature." Okay, so that's Bhagavatam. Now, there are three revelations of the Vedas that are mentioned. One is Shruti. Shruti is through hearing. Knowledge is revealed in the heart by hearing and accepting. And one is Nyaya, which is logic. And the third is Smriti, remembering. The three spiritual aspects of the Vedas is, so first is Sambandha. Who am I? Who is God? What is my relationship with God? Sambandha itself means relationship. What is Krishna to me? How is he related to me? Like, are we brothers? Are we lovers? Are we friends? Is he my master? Am I his servant? Like that. So what is our relationship? There are basically 5 rasas or 5 ways of expressing our love towards Krishna. So out of the 5, the one is Shantaras, which is basically, in a way, it's just not followed. It's a very different rasa. Shantaras is basically neither am I dying for him, neither, it's like in the middle, right? It's neutral. So we don't go in the neutral. Devotees, we like extremes. Either we're going to totally love the God, or either we're going to totally hate him. There is no middle point. So the 4 main points we have is Madhurya Ras, which is loving relationship, conjugal relationship. He's my girlfriend, he's my boyfriend, so on. Then there is the parental Vatsalya, which is, Krishna is like my son. Krishna is like, my daughter, or whatever you want. And then there is the Sakhya. Sakhya is friendship. Krishna is my best friend. He's the one I share everything with, And the 4th one is Dasya. I am his servant. He is my master. So that is our relationship. One of those we can choose. And right now, other rasas are more elevated than Dasya ras. That is why we follow with the Dasya, and then slowly we can go to the other ones. But we have to follow from Dasya. We have to understand first that we are the servants of Krishna. Slowly we can rise to the position, right? When you first join a company, you join as an employee. Then slowly you get, promoted to different levels. And then if you do really good, in the end, you become the CEO of the company, the main head, the managing director. So slowly you have to rise. So you start with Dasya, which is the easiest one to establish a relationship. And then you slowly move on to the other rasas that are there. Now, some people stop at, the class ends at around 9:15. So some people basically will stop at Dasya, like, no, we want to be the Dasya. We want to be the servants of Krishna all our lives. Some are like, no, I take him as my friend. Some are like, no, he's my son. Some take him like, no, he's my boyfriend, or so on. So that's Sambandha. Then the Abhideya. What is the purpose of, Abhideya is the purpose of elevation, bhakti, devotional service. So we first establish a Sambandha, then we follow the Abhideya, which is the process to a Prayojana, to a goal, the supreme goal of life, which is love of God. And then these 3 subject matters I discussed, Supreme Personality of Godhead is a central point of all relationships. So Sambandha. What is the Abhideya? Acting in devotional service to him is one's real occupation. And what is the Prayojana? Attainment of love of God is the ultimate goal of life. Okay. So now where did the Vedas come from? Right. So there is a verse in Bhagavad Gita 3.15 which says regulative activities are prescribed in the Vedas, and the Vedas are directly manifested from the Supreme Personality of Godhead. Consequently, the all-pervading transcendence is eternally situated in all acts of sacrifice. So the Vedas are coming directly from the Supreme Personality of Godhead. So this is the process of how it reaches to us today. You know, so Krishna, this is all in the Bhagavatam. I've noted the references. You can go ahead and read. Bhagavatam is all story wise, so if you read it from that matter, it's a really good thing to read. So Krishna first reveals the Vedic knowledge to Brahma. So this is in 2.9.5 to 37, second canto, 9th chapter, from verse 5 to 37. So first, Brahma seeks his origin and is instructed to perform penance. Basically, Brahma came out from the navel of Krishna, Garbhodakshaya Vishnu, and he was on a lotus petal. Now, it's just him. He is the first jiva. What is he supposed to do, right? When we are, for example, let's say if a teacher gives you a task, right? Just tells you, do this. That's all. Now you have no instructions on how to do it. What is the teacher expecting you to do? What is the result that is supposed to come? There is no information that is given. You're going to be very confused. You're going to be like, what am I supposed to do? What am I doing here? So that's exactly what Brahma was. He's like, what am I doing? I'm just born. Like, am I supposed to be doing anything? Am I just supposed to be sitting here? Like, what's going on? So he seeks his origin. Brahma started climbing down that lotus stem, and he was climbing down for many yugas, right? It's a huge, right? It was not even like for a few minutes. Yugas have passed by the time he climbs. He finds nothing. He sees that the stem is going on and on and on for so long. He gets fed up and goes right back up. He starts climbing back up and to the top of the lotus, the flower. So now he's like, okay, what am I supposed to do? So he hears a sound, tapa. That means penance. So he starts doing penance. He starts doing tapa. Now Krishna is pleased and reveals his transcendental realm. He reveals all that information, all the Vedic knowledge to Brahma. Then Brahma inquires from Krishna that, okay, now I know that you are the source. Now I know who you are. Now tell me, what is my job? So then Krishna reveals the answers to Brahma. Now Brahma has all the information. Now Krishna's job is done. His point was to get Brahma to this position to know the Vedic knowledge, and now it is Brahma's duty to pass it down. So what does Brahma do now? Brahma passes the knowledge to Narada. Who is Narada? Narada is the son of Brahma. So he passes the whole Vedic knowledge that he has to Narada. Now, till this point, it is only one Veda, which is the Atharva Veda. It is just one. Then from Narada, it goes to Vyasa. Now, once Vyasa gets it, that's when he starts to break it up. So Vyasa foresees the degradation of Kali Yuga. He sees how degraded our senses will be. He sees how kind of horrible situation we'll be living in. So he divides the Vedas into 4 parts, 108 Upanishads and the 5th Veda. Then there is a Vedanta Sutra, which is the essence of the philosophy. Sutra meaning the essence. And Bhagavatam is a natural commentary on the Vedanta Sutra. So that is how it started from Krishna, went to Brahma, from Brahma to Narada, and so on down to us. If, I will, in the Bhagavad Gita, right before the introduction ends, I think I showed you the last class also. I'll just go a few names. So in the last page of introduction of Bhagavad Gita, Srila Prabhupada has given us the whole disciplic succession starting from Krishna. So first is Krishna, then Krishna passes to Brahma. Brahma passes to Narada, Narada to Vyasa, and Vyasa to Madhva. Then from Madhva to Padmanabha, Narhari, Madhava, so on. And then it comes down all the way down to Madhavendra Puri. Then Madhavendra Puri comes down to Ishvara Puri. Then Ishwarapuri, we have Nityananda and Nityananda Mahaprabhu and Advaita Acharya. From there, it comes down to Lord Chaitanya. From Lord Chaitanya to the six Goswamis. From that to Raghunath and Jiva Goswami. Then so on to Jagannath Das Babaji Maharaj. Then from there, it goes to Bhakti Vinod Thakur, then Gaurkishore Das Thakur, then Bhaktisiddhanta Saraswati, then Srila Prabhupada, and then from Srila Prabhupada to all his sannyasi disciples, all the disciples, and then from there to us, maybe to our parents, and from our parents to us. So it follows a succession, it follows a lineage. It does not just directly come from Krishna to us. It's a whole lineage that is coming down. So who recorded the Vedas? So we know that basically Vyasadeva recorded the Vedas. He wrote it down. Before that, it was not written. It was passed only by Shruti. And people remembered. They were known as Shrutidhars. Those who can remember by hearing just once. You can tell them paragraphs and paragraphs of information and they'll remember it word by word. Now, so those are Shrutidhars. So Vyasadeva was like, okay, this kind of power might be with us for a couple more years, but it's not going to go on till the Kali Yuga. So why don't I write it down? It'll be easy for people to understand, people to remember. And that is what Vyasadeva did. So in Bhagavatam, there's a verse which says, O learned one, in this iron age of Kali, men almost always have but short lives. They are quarrelsome, lazy, misguided, unlucky, and above all, always disturbed. We always have stress. What's going to happen? What's going to happen in school? I have a test coming. I have this coming up. I have that coming up. So we are always disturbed. How did Vyasadeva know about Kali Yuga? So who is Vyasadeva? Vyasadeva is Vyasadeva is the incarnation of Vishnu or Krishna. So Krishna has the power to know the past, present, and future. So Vyasadeva had that power that he can know the future of what's going to happen. That not just Vyasadeva, even Vedas, right? You see, Vedas are coming from Krishna. And you can read here, Srimad Bhagavatam, this verse is there. O learned one, in this iron age of Kali, men almost always have but short lives. Bhagavatam is what? These verses are from the Vedas. All this information, the same verse might not be there, but the same information is there because the Bhagavatam was written by Vyasadeva. So the verse will not be there. But that same information is already present in the Vedas, which is coming from Krishna. So when something is coming from Krishna, it is the truth. It is going to happen. If it doesn't happen, then that is not written actually. If something didn't happen, that means it wasn't meant to be. So Krishna, of course, knows, right, what's going to happen in Kali Yuga. He knows what's going to happen trillions and trillions of years later. We have no idea about that, but he already has an idea. He's the one who's playing the game, right? He's the one who's controlling everything. He knows what's going to happen. So it's coming from the Vedas. So therefore, and Vyasadeva knew the Vedas very well. And first of all, he knew the Vedas very well because he's instructed by one of the best gurus in this material world, which is Narada. Second thing, he is the incarnation of Krishna. So he has to have that power. He has that power to see future. He has that power to see the past. So he knew what's going to happen in Kali Yuga. And of course, he had the Vedas to help him also, to know that. Now, one may ask, why does Vyasadeva, being the incarnation of Krishna, need a guru? Why did Narada had to instruct Vyasadeva? So let's understand that whatever Krishna does, he does to set an example. The whole thing he does is he wants to set an example of how we should act. Take for example, Ramachandra. Ramachandra is also known as Maryada Purushottam. Maryada means knowing our Maryada, knowing our boundaries, knowing where we should stop and where we should start. And he is Maryada Purushottam. He's the one who has conquered the boundaries. He's the one who knows the boundaries very well. He set an example of how, a husband should be. He set an example of how a son should be. He sets an example of how a brother should be, and so on. So whatever Krishna does, whatever Vishnu does, it's all to set an example. So if Vyasadev had to have a guru, then what are we? How can we advance without a guru? If Vyasadev, who is the supreme personality of Godhead, if he needed Narada as a guru, then where are we? We are nowhere close. We're just the part and parcels of Krishna. We are not Krishna. We are not anywhere close to the power of even being close to Krishna. We are just the small, minute part and parcels. So we have to have a guru. We have to take up a guru. We have to understand this knowledge through the disciplic succession, which is coming to us from our gurus. So that is the point. He was just trying to set an example of why do we need a guru? What is the importance of the guru? How should the guru guide us? Right? All these kinds of examples he said in. Now, before I move on, this is from today's class. That was all previous class. Are there any questions before we move on? If you have any questions right now, you can go ahead and ask, and then we'll move on to the next part.
Prabhuji, I have a question.
Yeah.
You said that whatever the Lord does is to set an example.
Right.
Then what Krishna did, like with the gopis and everything, should we also follow that, or?
But I think Prabhuji are on mute.
Can you hear me now?
Yes, Prabhuji.
So going back to the point, Krishna, first of all, Krishna, when he came down to this planet, Krishna is not known as Maryada Purushottam. Krishna is known as Leela Purushottam. He was the one who used to do Leelas, right? Krishna did not come down. When he came down, he did not come as an avatar. He came himself. So let us understand that first. He is not Maryada Purushottam. He is Leela Purushottam. Then second point is, whatever Krishna did was Leela, right? We cannot follow a Leela. Now, even Krishna, see, some certain things we should follow what Krishna did. Even Krishna went to the Gurukul. He took knowledge from Sandipani Muni. That was his guru. So even he said that guru. See, all the avatars of Krishna, they set an example for something called a principle. Principles don't change. Our principles should not change. The principles stay steady. And whatever else he does, those are leelas. So Krishna, set up. So one principle is that we have to follow Guru. All his avatars did, right? When he came, not all, but yes, he said many times. He set an example. As even Chaitanya Mahaprabhu, he came. He had a Guru, Ishwarapuri. So he came down as Krishna. He had a Guru, Sandipani Muni. He came down as Vyasadev. He had a Guru, Narada. So he sets an example of the principles. Like playing around with the gopis is not a principle. That is only for Krishna, right? So doing that is only for Krishna. Then anything else, marrying 16,108 wives, go ahead. Krishna, actually, one Maharaj, I forgot the name. He actually did say that you want to do everything Krishna did, go ahead. You want to marry 16,108 wives, nobody's stopping you. Please go ahead. But then do it exactly how Krishna did it. He expanded himself 16,108 times. He was with each of his queen for 24/7. Can you do that? Are you able to expand yourself even into two people? No, you can't do it. If you want to follow Krishna, follow everything he did. He was playing around with the gopis. Go ahead. You also play around with the gopis. But do it exactly how Krishna did it. Will you be able to do that? In Rasa dance, each gopi had its own Krishna. Are you able to do that? No. So therefore, if we cannot follow completely, we should not follow even minutely. Krishna lifted the Govardhan hill. Forget about Govardhan hill. Can you lift a table on your pinky for not even one day, for 1 hour? Balance it for just 1 hour. Forget about 7 days and 7 nights. Just 1 hour, can you balance? No. If we cannot even do that minutely, then don't follow a Leela minutely. Follow it completely or don't follow it at all. So whatever Krishna did with his Leelas, he did because he's Krishna. He's able to do it. If we become Krishna, then we should also do. But we can never become Krishna. So we should not follow the Leelas. We should follow the principles that he set for us. Get a guru. That is the most important principle he set. He also had a guru. He also had to accept a guru. He had to go to Gurukul to accept the knowledge. Sandipani Muni offered him that knowledge. He taught him. So we must accept a guru. That is one principle. Other principles that he said, we should follow those principles, right? So that is how we deal with these things. We should not follow him, whatever he did blindly. Whatever he did is because he's able to do it. He's Krishna. He is the supreme personality of Godhead. So if we can do that, then we should of course do it. If you can be with each of your wife 24/7 and show them that this equal amount of love to each of the wife, if you can do that, you can go ahead. Marry as many as you want. Break the record. Marry 20,000 wives. Break Krishna's record. Krishna is the known for the most number of amount of wives ever in this whole planet, or ever actually. You can go ahead and break that record. You'll be more than happy. But you have to do it how he did it. You have to be with each of your wife 24/7. You can't do that. We cannot expand ourselves 16,000 times. Forget 16,000. We can't even expand ourselves one time. So become two of you. Forget that. We ourselves just personally cannot be equal towards other person. I hate this person. I like that person. He's nice to me. She's nice to me. I like her. I like him. I don't like him. He always makes fun of me. Even in this body, just being one, we cannot be equal towards everyone. Then how can we be equal towards 16,000 or more people? So therefore, we cannot be Krishna. We cannot do what Krishna achieved. In the Bhagavad Gita, it is said, there's a verse, and it says, Pandita Samadarshana. One who is the Pandita sees everyone equally, even a dog, even a criminal, even a devotee. He sees everyone equally. Why? Because he sees the Krishna inside the heart. Can we do that? We cannot. We might like something, we might not like other thing. If we cannot do that, we cannot see everything equally, then we cannot even forget about multiplying ourselves. Even in this body, we cannot do it. How can we do it in multiple bodies? Now, through yoga, there is a way, it is a siddhi, it is a power that we can achieve to multiply ourselves 7 times max. But even though 7 times, like Krishna, what he did is when he was multiplying himself, each version of Krishna was acting in its own. They were individual Krishnas. But if we multiply our 7 times through that siddhi, first of all, take many lifetimes to achieve that siddhi. Okay, now let's say you did. Even if you multiply yourself 7 times, all those other 6 versions will be following what you are doing. They will not be independent. So nowhere can we follow whatever Krishna did. But we can try to follow the principles, not the leelas, the principles. Even if we try to follow the principles minutely, it will be very favorable to us. Okay, so that is very important. Any more questions?
Thank you, Prabhuji.
Okay, so let's move on to today's class. The topic is short, so don't worry about it. I should be able to finish this chapter today. We'll not have another class on this. So let's understand, what are Vedas? Vedas are a manual for mankind. Let's say if you buy something, one second. Let's say if you were to buy a new product, a new electronic product, a new machine, each of the machine that you buy is going to come with a manual. It's going to come of how to use it, operational manual. How do I use this machine? What if something happens with the machine? How am I supposed to fix the issue? So each of that. Now our life, this life is in a way like a machine. We get a manual for that machine as well, which is the Vedas. We have to read the manual. If there is some troubleshooting, we read it. For example, what kind of troubleshooting would we need? Let's say if we get a disease. Now, how do I cure this disease? The cure of this disease in the Ayurveda, that is one section of the Vedas. Actually, Ayurveda, as many doctors say that there is no cure for cancer. There is. They just don't know. There is a cure for cancer in the Vedas. In the Ayurvedic section, there is a cure for cancer. There is a cure for any disease. And that is there. We just have to read it. We have to believe in it and we have to read it and it will happen. Our bodies, Krishna is the best. He made our bodies that we can fight any disease. We just have to have the will to fight it and the right direction from the Vedas. Everything is there in the Vedas. So that is our manual. Any kind of troubleshooting, you are having stress, you are having this thing. Open up the Bhagavad Gita. The Bhagavad Gita is a condensed version of your troubleshooting errors. It has the solutions to almost all the problems. So that is where we go. We have been given this thing, so we should use it. So if we fail to study the Vedas, what is going to happen? Our lives will become miserable. If you have stress, if you don't know the solution, then you're going to have an issue. Is there a cure for COVID in Ayurveda? Now, Ayurveda may not contain the word COVID, but what is COVID? COVID is a disease and it's a specific type of disease. And yes, Ayurveda has a way for us to fight that disease. See, look at COVID itself. COVID does affect everyone, but it does not impact everyone. Everyone can get COVID, but like teenagers, younger people will not get so affected by COVID. Why? Because their immune system is so strong. Elderly people, their immune system is not strong. So Ayurveda gives us a way to make our immune system strong. See, Vedas, what they do, the best thing about Vedas is they don't deal with the problem. They deal with the root cause of the problem. Why does COVID affect us? It is because our immune system is not strong to fight it. That is our root problem. Our immune system is failing. The Veda will give us a power to fight the immune system, which can get rid of the COVID. It does not have a cure for COVID. It has a cure for making our immune system stronger, which will fight off COVID. So that's how Vedas deal. Vedas always deal with the root cause problem. They go to the base of the problem. Where is this problem occurring from? And they have the solution to that. For example, they want something. Let's say you go to a shop. You see a new iPhone. You look at it, you window shop. You're like, oh, I like this. It looks cool. It'll give me a good what's that word called? It'll give me a good status symbol. I have a very brand new phone. I have this very expensive phone. It's amazing, Apple, blah, and all that stuff. Slowly, that contemplation will get to desire. If that desire doesn't get fulfilled, we'll get anger. Then once we get anger, we're like, now I will do anything to get this. That becomes lust. So now Veda does not tell us how to get an iPhone or how not to get an iPhone. What is the root cause? Contemplation, not able to control your senses. Vedas attack that. Vedas will teach you how to control your senses, all in the Bhagavad Gita, chapters 2, from verse 33 and so on. They start talking about how to deal with controlling our lust, how to control with our senses. So that is what Vedas do. They go to the root cause problem. They don't deal with upper things. They go all the way to the deeper point. And they're like, okay, the cause of this temptation is lack of control of our senses. Let us learn how to control the senses. Everything will be solved. That is what Vedas do. So anyways, going to why do we put our faith in the Vedas? Because there is an authority. It is an authoritative thing. For example, if you want to locate an address, we might rely on Google Maps. Like, okay, Google Map, take us there. Now, Google Map is not an authority. It is a reliable source, right? But Vedas is not a reliable source. It is an authority. What is the criteria for an authoritative source? First thing, it should be infallible, meaning no mistakes, never disproved of. It is always true. Second point, it should have stood the test of time, meaning over the period of time, it has not been changed. It stays the same. And that is only true with Vedic knowledge. Material knowledge does not stand these criteria. Let us look into how it does not stand that criteria. Where it go? So as you were talking before, let's take Google Maps, for example. Google Maps is always getting revised. Any kind of app, any kind of software, any kind of website is getting revised, updated. Oh, there is a new update on our phones. Oh, there is a new update here. Even the school system is getting updated. Let's talk about Common Core. Now you guys have Common Core now, but when I was in middle school, there was nothing known as Common Core. Even high school, there was nothing. This was 6 years back. There was no Common Core. It was based on math one, different types of math levels. Now everything is Common Core. So there is a new update system. For us older teenagers, we have to give something called the ACT or SAT. They're also getting updated. Even everything is getting updated for the good or for the bad, but it's getting updated. Therefore, it is not authoritative. If something gets updated, how is it authoritative? If something is authoritative, we can rely completely on. We can believe this is the absolute truth. But if it's getting changed, it's getting updated, that's not good. That's not authoritative. Bhagavad Gita has not changed since Krishna first gave to Arjuna or first gave to Vaivaswan. It has not changed since then. That's why it is an authoritative source. Now, modern science will need revision sooner or later, and it only deals with matter, not spiritual truth. So we cannot rely on the modern science for spiritual benefit. Now, Vedas is the topmost authoritative source of information. Today, we have the distance between Earth and the sun, but it's not accurate. Even that distance that there is not accurate. The most accurate distance is in the Hanuman Chalisa. There is a verse which says, Yug Sahastra Yojan Parabhanu. Now, why does Hanuman Chalisa have the exact one? Hanuman, when he was young, he saw the sun as a mango. Now, Hanuman is Shiva. He is very powerful. So he was able to fly from Earth to sun. He traveled from Earth to sun without any spacesuit, without any spaceship, just his body, his clothes, his mace, and he flew. And he's like, I'm going to get that mango that I want. He flew. So in that it is Yug Sahastra Yojan Parabhanu. A Yug is 12,000 years. Sahasra is 1,000 and Yojan, 1 Yojan is 8 miles. So multiply 12,000 by 1,000 by 8 and you'll get the exact distance from Earth to sun, which today is known as 1 astronomical unit. Now, Hanuman was in the time of Rama, Treta Yuga, many years back. They are finding this today. So that is why Vedas are more accurate. They have all the information. We just have to find it. I'll talk more about how what Vedas have that modern science is now getting. Let me actually get to that only. These are the parallels in the Vedas and modern science. Let's talk about this first. I think it goes well. So parallels in the Vedas and modern science. Yes, science is not authority. So, yes, exactly. Science is not authority. It keeps changing. You can never believe in science. First of all, I'm not sure if you were in the last class or not. Where is science coming from? Who is discovering science? Us humans. Us humans are very limited. We don't have perfect senses. We don't have anything perfect in our lives. How can we get anything that is, perfect? We cannot. So science is all based on assumptions, on experiments, on such things, and these are not accurate. They're not accurate. We'll talk about how it's not in this class only. I'll try to finish all this today. There's a lot that we can cover, but I'll try to finish it. So yes, but that's true. Science is not authoritative. There are many things science itself is now starting to disagree with. So parallels in the Vedas and modern science. Modern science is now finding concepts which are already in the Vedas. For example, in Mahabharata, Gandhari in anger hit really hard, punched her own stomach, her womb, due to which her children could not be formed. So what Vyasadeva took is Vyasadeva took a lump of flesh out of her womb and divided into 100 pots and one pot. So 101 pots, 100 sons and one daughter. So now, even today, science is not able to figure out how to make a baby outside of the mother's womb. Can they make in a lab? They don't have that information yet. But here, Vyasadev made them into earthen pots. Within earthen pots made of clay, he was able to make babies. That is there in the Veda, how to do it properly. But modern science is not going to believe, because they're like, oh, this is ancient. They don't realize is what they're getting is from there only. Today, whatever our mind thinks, the only reason we think is because it has happened somewhere. There is a power. For example, let's take Star Wars. Star Wars is the most imaginary scientific thing, science fiction, sorry. But it's true, right? People are traveling from one galaxy to another galaxy. People are able to do that. People are traveling from one planet to another planet without spaceships, with their own spaceships. So what the Star Wars that we have here may not be true for our planet, but it's true for other universes. They have wars between one planet and another planet. There's always been that. There always has been wars between planets. Always have been wars between galaxies. So whatever people come up is something, because it has happened, it is true in another realm. It's just true in another universe. That is why we're able to think. We cannot think anything original. Whatever we do is actually never original. Humans don't have the power of doing anything original. It is all coming from Krishna. So everything that we think is true in a way because it may have happened. Okay. So anyways, in Ramayana, Ravan had a Pushpak Viman. It was basically a plane which used to fly without fuel, without engines. So Wright brothers were not the ones who created flying things. There were many before. They're just one who rediscovered the art of flying. But even till then, we need engines. Ravana was flying without any engines. He was just flying and flying very fast, much faster than what we can fly. In Mahabharata, there is a very famous weapon known as Brahmastra. Brahmastra and Kurukshetra were also many different weapons. These weapons are more powerful than the nuclear weapons we have, more accurate. Brahmastra was launched from somewhere. Ashwathama launched this, and it went and only attacked the womb of Uttara. It was that accurate. Today, to even launch a rocket from the United States to another country, you have to have the longitudes, the latitudes, how much power we need, all this stuff, how much fuel to launch the rocket, from how far to launch the rocket. Nothing was there at that time. They just were to summon the Brahmastra, tell what the target is, and it goes and hits on the target. That's how accurate it was. Now, modern science today is not even to that level. They're still getting to that level of getting a weapon which can attack such accuracy. Then in the third canto of Bhagavatam, there is a whole chapter dedicated to how an embryo grows within the womb. Now, the way this grows, we have that information now. Bhagavatam was written so many yugas back, so many mantras back actually. So this information is there. Bhagavatam is not written by Prabhupada. It is only translated by Prabhupada. It was written by Vyasadeva. Vyasadeva was way back. So it is all there. This is a picture of Hanuman trying to think that sun is a mango and he wants the mango. Anyway, so the Bhagavatam, there is distance between the planets and different places in the universe. We still don't know the distances between planets. Some planets we have information, but some we don't. Again, Hanuman Chalisa calculates that. So this is the parallels in the Vedas and modern science, and many things are in the Vedas that modern science has not been able to do. Such there Vedic predictions in the Vedas. One of the Vedic predictions is in Buddha. In Srimad Bhagavatam 1.3.24, it is said what Buddha will do, what Buddha will be, what's the point of the Buddha. Then Chanakya Pandit in the 12th canto. Then even Mahabharata and Srimad Bhagavatam both quote Chaitanya Mahaprabhu's what he's going to come, what he is, and all that stuff. Chandragupta and Emperor Ashoka. Then Jesus and Muhammad in Bhavishya Puran, Atharva Ved, Kanda 20 and Shukta 127 verses 1 to 3. Has about Jesus and Muhammad and many other places also. Kalki Avatar, Bhagavatam states multiple times, first canto, 12th canto, 10th canto. All these things are already in the Vedas, which are many years old, many, not even years, many yugas old. And now modern science is understanding all this. That is why it's modern, but it's not authoritative. It's new, but it's not authoritative. Now, understanding now what we know what Vedas are. Now, how do we understand Vedas? How do we get this knowledge of Vedas to us? That is what I've been always talking about, which is the disciplic succession. So in the material world, there are two ways to approach something. One is inductive, not accepting any authority and trying to find the truth by one's own endeavor or speculation. For example, if you want to know who your dad is, how will you find? Inductive, you cannot believe anyone because you don't believe on authority. So you're going to go run some test, ask every human being, living being, there's 8 billion people about now, and you're going to go ask them, hey, are you my father? Hey, are you my father? Hey, are you my father? Let's run DNA test and find out who your father is. Now this relies on the finding of the truth by speculation. This is the approach which is used in science. Science does not believe on any authority. They're like, we will find the thing. That is why it is not correct. It remains as a system of trial and error only. Let me try this. For example, you're talking about COVID vaccine. How was that? Try and error. Okay, let me mix this chemical with this chemical. This doesn't work. Okay, what about this chemical to this chemical? This also doesn't work. Okay, blah, keep going, keep going, keep going. Months later, they come out with a vaccine. Even that vaccine is not able to cure it completely. It just prevents it. The second way is deductive. So deductive way, one of the ways is for the Vedas specifically. Vedas are also called Shruti. And Shruti refers to that knowledge which is acquired by hearing. It is not experimental. For example, you want to know who your father is again. Now, the best way to find your father is ask your mother. Mom, who is my father? And the mom will tell you about the father, about the brothers, about sisters, about the whole family history. She'll tell you. We apply that same fundamental principle here. Vedas are like our mother. To know our father, we must ask the Vedas. And Vedas tell you that your father is Krishna. That is why we should have that faith in Vedas. And the only way to get that faith is through let me get to this previous slide we were talking about, through the disciplic succession. The Vedic truth reaches the student by the descending process from the Vedas and through the Guru, which is known as, this chain of transmission is known as Guru Parampara. In Bhagavad Gita 4.2, Krishna says, Evam parapara praptam imam rajasayo vidhu. The supreme science was thus received through the chain of disciplic succession, and the saintly kings understood it in that way. But in course of time, the succession was broken, and therefore the science as it is, appears to be lost. So we have to accept the disciplic succession. Now, it is lost, correct. But Srila Prabhupada has reconnected it for us. Srila Prabhupada has reconnected this lineage. Sri Chaitanya Mahaprabhu has reconnected this lineage. All the Goswamis have reconnected this lineage, and we now can believe on this lineage and follow it. So we have to accept a guru. Now, a guru can be anyone. It does not have to be, say, for example, a Prabhupada disciple. Even our parents are a guru. But the guru is I understand that the guru is for spiritual knowledge, not for material knowledge. They're also gurus, but they're teachers, right? They're giving us material knowledge. They're not going to help us spiritually. Here, the guru, the disciplic succession is meant for following spiritually, not materially. Baladev Vidyabhushan, who is amazing, what's it called? He's an amazing Vaishnava, actually. In his Ratnavali, in his book, there is a first prameya. The prameya is something, a truth that is meant to be understood. That is the verse. I'm not going to read it long, but the point of the verse is any mantra, it's from Padma Puran, basically. His commentary is from that Padma Puran, which is Veda. Any mantra that does not come in disciplic succession is considered to be useless. Therefore, 4 divine individuals will appear in the age of Kali to establish disciplic schools. We have this, right? We have the Brahma, we have from Lakshmi, we have from Rudra, we have from Sanaka Rishi. Then for Brahma, we have the Madhvacharya. For, let me read it. Ramanujacharya was chosen for Lakshmi, then Sri Sampradaya, then Madhvacharya, then Vishnu Swami for Rudra, and Nimbatacharya for the four Kumaras. Yes, the Nimbaka line. So there are different schools, right, through which we can follow and achieve this. And one of the best ones is the highest one is Brahma. So Brahma, Vadva, Gaudiya Vaishnavism. That is what we follow. Coming from Brahma to Madhva and then from there to us. So understand that we have to go through the disciplic succession and we have to understand all this. So inductive and deductive approaches. These approaches are great. Of course, deductive is better than inductive, but even through deductive, we have to have the right source. We have to use deductive reasoning, the deductive approach, but that approach should be to the right person. Right? Here, when you want to know your father, you have to go to your mother. So here, if you want to go to Krishna, you have to go to the Vedas. Now, how to get the Vedas? Through the Guru. So we have to accept this succession. We have to join within this succession. And in that slide, there was a point. The succession is not just with your Guru. Let me get to that slide. The connection is not just with the spiritual master, but with the spiritual master of the spiritual master of the spiritual master of the spiritual master, and so on. It leads you from your Guru up to Srila Prabhupada, from Srila Prabhupada to Chaitanya Mahaprabhu, all the Acharyas, all the 6 Goswamis, and all the way up to Madhvacharya, then Brahma, then Krishna. The connection from your spiritual master will lead you to Krishna, will not lead you anywhere else. That is why we need to accept a bona fide, authoritative spiritual master who will teach you the science of Krishna very thoroughly and very properly. So here we can conclude the chapter 4 to know, having a clear understanding of what is the Vedas, how to approach the Vedas, what is that process of learning the Vedas. You know, the Mundaka Upanishad 1.2.12 also states that a sincere student has to approach the ideal Guru to receive transcendental knowledge and enlightenment. If Krishna did it, we have to do it. If Krishna required through Vyasadeva, he required Narada. Through Krishna himself, he required Sandipani Muni. Then what are we? We have to accept a Guru. So here we can end our class. And if there are any further questions, you can ask. If there are no further questions, then we can end the class here. So as I said, the connection is not from our spiritual master, but all the way to Krishna. And that is the importance of saying this prayer, Vancha Kalpatarubhyascha. This is very important because this is, again, offering our obeisances to the lineage, offering our obeisances to the other Vaishnavas. That is why it's important. So let's read that. Vancha Kalpatarubhyascha Kripa Sindhubhyeva Patitanam Pavanebhyo Vaishnavebhyo. Srila Prabhupada ki jai.
Thank you.